Welcome to the HFY Codex Tale. If you like our videos, keep supporting and subscribe to our channel. The laugh that echoed across stars. The room shook with laughter. Not the warm kind, not the friendly kind. This was mocking laughter, sharp, cold, and full of pride. It came from a large hall aboard the warship Vrexen Blade, home of the feared Tharnak warrior women. Tharnak females were taller than most aliens born for combat. Their muscles were sharp like metal, their voices like thunder, and their eyes showed no fear. And today they were laughing about Earth. Commander Tyrell slammed her armored fist on the table. Earthmen, soft bones, soft hearts. No fangs, no armor, no instinct. The others joined her, some clapping, some howling. Their men write poems while we fight wars. I heard they get dizzy in zero gravity. They cry when they lose pets. The room filled with more laughter. To them, Earth was a weak little planet, full of soft-skinned males who knew nothing about war, discipline, or honor. And this made them feel powerful. Until the door opened. He walked in slowly. Alone. No guards, no translator, no fear. Just a plain black jacket, simple boots, and sharp human eyes. The room went quiet. He stopped near the center table, looked around, and spoke calmly. You must be the warriors I'm assigned to. That was Drake Callan, Earth's diplomatic representative, and the first male human ever sent to train with the Tharnak War Legion. The silence didn't last long. A warrior with silver skin and bright red tattoos leaned forward. They sent you. Drake nodded once. Yes, I'm here to observe, to learn, to train. The laughter returned. Even louder this time. Tyrell stood, towering over him. You're a lamb among hunters, human. Maybe, he said, unfazed. Or maybe I'm just the first one brave enough to walk into your den. That made her pause. She expected begging, or fear, or silence. But not that. Tell me, Drake of Earth, she said, circling him slowly. How do you plan to survive among us? By doing what humans do best, he replied. Watching, learning, and then doing the thing no one expects. The warriors watched him closely now. Still laughing inside, but something had changed. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't fighting back. He was just standing there, calm, collected. Tyrell pointed to the wall. That door leads to the training chamber. You'll report there tomorrow at first light. Understood, Drake said. You will be tested, and if you fail... I understand that too. She narrowed her eyes. Most males wouldn't last one round with a youngling. Then I guess I'll have to be different. After he left, the warriors looked at each other. Still smirking, but some of them were quiet. One leaned closer to Tyrell. Why did he come alone? Because he's foolish, Tyrell said quickly. Or maybe, she paused. He's hiding something. That night, as the warriors trained in their chambers, Drake sat quietly in the guest quarters. He pulled out a small photo. A picture of a planet, Earth, his home. He looked at it with soft eyes. Then slowly whispered. They laugh now, but they've never seen what Earth becomes when it's cornered. In her own chamber, Tyrell reviewed his file. No weapons. No advanced implants. No combat ranking. Just a note from the Earth Command. Observe this one closely. He is not what he appears. She frowned, and for the first time in years, she felt something strange. Curiosity. The challenge no one thought he'd accept. The next morning, the training arena buzzed with energy. Tharnak warriors filled the steel stands, weapons on their backs, arms crossed, eyes watching. This was no normal drill. This was a test. And at the center of the ring stood Drake. No armor, no helmet, just his calm stare and steady breath. Commander Tyrell entered the arena last, her boots echoing like thunder. Drake of Earth, she said, voice booming. We offer you a chance to back down. He didn't move. I'm still here, or I. A few warriors chuckled, but others narrowed their eyes. Then choose your opponent, Tyrell said. Pick the weakest if you like. No, Drake replied. You choose and don't hold back. Gasps moved through the crowd. He wants to die, one warrior muttered. Or he's never been hit before, another added. But Tyrell was watching him closely. No fear in his eyes. No ego either. Only something she couldn't quite name. She raised her hand. Rachna, she called. A massive warrior stepped forward. Her skin was dark bronze, her arms thicker than Drake's chest. Her hands were wrapped in silver bindings. She smiled as she walked into the ring. I will be gentle, she said almost kindly. Please don't, Drake replied. The gong rang. Rachna moved fast, faster than any human could see. But Drake stepped to the side just in time. She swung again. He ducked, spun, tapped the back of her leg with his palm. It wasn't an attack. It was a read. And he was learning fast. The crowd watched, confused. Why isn't he hitting? Is he running? No, he's studying her. Then on the fourth strike, he moved into her. Not away. Not back. Forward. He let her strike come, then used her own weight against her. Rachna stumbled, off balance. Drake didn't punch her. He simply touched her center and let her fall. Hard. The arena went dead silent. A human man had just dropped one of the strongest Tharnak warriors without hitting her once. Rachna looked up from the ground, stunned. Drake offered his hand. That wasn't about power, he said softly. It was about control. Commander Tyrell stepped forward. Where did you learn that? Earth is full of violence, Drake said. But the best warriors don't use it until they must. Some warriors looked uncomfortable. Others looked impressed. Tyrell's lips tightened. That was one opponent, she said. You still haven't proven anything. Then give me more, he said. Are you challenging all of us? No, Drake said. I'm asking you to watch. Because what you think is strength might just be noise. Tyrell didn't respond. But something in her chest shifted. For the first time, she couldn't laugh. That night, whispers spread through the ship. The human didn't bleed. He didn't break. He didn't even fight and still won. They called him weak yesterday. Now they weren't so sure. And Tyrell. She sat alone in the strategy room, staring at the battle footage. Replaying it. Over and over. Trying to figure out. What kind of man never fights back, but never loses either? Her first mistake was underestimating him. Commander Tyrell stood in the center of the arena. No announcement, no warning. Just her towering figure, arms crossed, eyes sharp like blades. Drake entered quietly, as always, calm, focused. The air between them was heavier than before. There was no crowd today. Just silence, because the others knew this wasn't a match. This was a message. Why now? Drake asked. Because the others are watching, she said. And they need to know that you are still human, breakable, weak. He tilted his head slightly. So this is about pride? No, she replied, this is about truth. She removed her outer armor. Underneath, her muscles glowed with bio-ink symbols of every victory she'd earned. No human had ever touched her in combat. Not once. Until now, no one had dared to try. She stepped forward. You may strike first. Drake didn't move. No, you go ahead. Tyrell lunged without hesitation. Fast. Deadly. Years of training behind every strike. But Drake stepped aside. Not out of fear. Out of rhythm. He moved like water. Not against her. Around her. Every time she struck, he wasn't where she expected. Every block she prepared, he never used. Her body was stronger, her speed was faster. But he controlled the pace. Then, after 5 minutes of movement, breathing, and silence, he touched her wrist lightly and whispered, You're angry. She blinked, startled. What? Not at me, at yourself. You dare analyze me in combat. I don't fight to win, he said softly. I fight to reflect. She swung again, harder this time, a real strike. He caught her arm gently, not with force, with timing. Turned, and guided her downward. She hit the ground, controlled, safe, but beaten. The floor went quiet again. She looked up at him, her breathing heavy. Why didn't you finish me? Because this wasn't a fight, Drake said. It was a lesson. A lesson in what? That power means nothing if you don't understand what you're protecting. For a long time, Tyrell said nothing. Then she stood slowly. She didn't raise her fists. She raised her hand and placed it on her own chest. A warrior sign of respect. You're not like the others, she admitted. You don't lead with muscle, you lead with mind. That's not just human, he replied. That's survival. Later that night, the warriors who once mocked him now watched him in silence. Not with laughter, not with challenge, but with attention. They saw something in him now. Not a man without strength, but a man who didn't need to prove it. In her private chamber, Tyrell replayed the final moment again. The soft way he touched her wrist, the stillness in his eyes. And for the first time in her life, she wondered what it meant to be strong without ever raising a blade. The night they stopped laughing, the training deck was quiet that night. No shouting, no sparring, no roaring laughter from the Tharnak warriors. Just stillness. Commander Tyrell sat near the center fire with her warriors around her, some sitting, some standing, all curious. And across from them sat Drake, the human man who had changed everything without throwing a single punch. You asked why Earthmen cry, he said, breaking the silence. I did, one warrior admitted. It seemed weak. Drake nodded. We cry because we remember. Remember what? Tyrell asked. Pain, he said. Loss, love, sacrifice. We don't hide from it, we carry it. He pulled out a small data stone. With one press, images floated in the air. Burning cities, dark skies, and people helping each other through fire and rubble. This is Earth's history, not the version in your files, the real one. What happened? One younger warrior whispered. Everything, he said. We destroyed each other with weapons. We starved our people. We poisoned our land. We lost oceans to greed, children to war, and families to power. You survived all this? Another asked, shocked. Barely, he said. The images changed, now showing hands building homes, humans holding each other, crying and laughing, carrying the wounded, standing up in protests and standing tall in peace. But we rebuilt, not because we were strong, not because we were fast, but because we refused to give up. Tyrell's voice was quiet now. We thought Earthmen had no pain, no past. That's because you only looked at our muscles, Drake said. Not our scars. The fire crackled. Not a single warrior laughed now. One of them removed her helmet slowly. You speak like a soldier, she said. Drake shook his head. No, I speak like a man who has seen too much and still chose to live. Tyrell looked into the fire. Her voice was almost a whisper. When we fall in battle, we sing to honor the warrior's path. What do your people do for the ones you lose? Drake looked down. We cry. We plant trees. We write their names in stone. And we promise to be better. Silence. For the first time, the Tharnak warrior women sat with their pride lowered, not broken but softened. Not out of shame, but out of understanding. One younger warrior, barely out of training, stood. She bowed her head. If crying means remembering, then maybe we should remember more. Drake smiled gently. You can be warriors and still be human. Tyrell met his eyes. And you are more warrior than we ever saw coming. That night there was no challenge. No sparring. No loud stories of conquest. Just one quiet voice, telling the kind of story that even the sharpest blade couldn't cut through. And when the stars rose above the ship, some of the warriors, for the first time in their lives, sat in silence and listened to the world within them. When one warrior fell for the human, Commander Tyrell stood alone on the upper deck of the Vrexen blade, her hands resting on the railing, eyes locked on the stars. She had been in countless battles, faced monsters, watched worlds burn, but now, for the first time, she felt something she couldn't name. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something softer. And it started the moment she realized she didn't want to laugh at him anymore. Drake sat below in the training room, fixing one of their damaged drones. He hummed quietly, some Earth tune she didn't understand. She watched him from above, hidden in the shadows. He didn't try to impress anyone. He didn't act like a soldier. He just was. "You're starring," a voice said behind her. It was Rick Shah, one of her top warriors. Tyrell didn't turn. "I'm observing. You used to observe weaknesses. Now you look at him like he's a riddle." Tyrell stayed silent. "Is he still weak to you?" Rickshaw asked. Tyrell shook her head slowly. "No, he's something else now. Something dangerous." "No," she whispered. "Something rare." That evening, she joined him in the repair bay for the first time. "Need help?" she asked. He looked up and smiled, surprised but calm. "Only if you know how to fix a pulse coil with broken fingers." "I've broken bones, not circuits." "Then we're halfway there." She chuckled, really chuckled, and sat beside him. They worked in silence. Then she finally asked, "Why do you still stay here, Drake, even after proving yourself?" He didn't look at her. "Because I haven't learned everything yet." "About us." "About you," he said. "About why strength needs armor and why you never take yours off." That hit her harder than she expected. She stared at the wires in front of her, but her mind was far away. He saw her. Not her title, not her muscles, her. And it scared her more than war ever did. Later, in her private chamber, Tyrell stared into her mirror. She touched the scar on her shoulder, one earned in her first battle. She had never shown it to anyone. But now, she wondered what he'd say if he saw it. Would he be disgusted? Or would he call it beautiful? She didn't know. And that made her want to find out. The next morning, she found him again, this time without armor, without reason. "Just to talk." "Do Earth men choose mates for strength?" she asked suddenly. Drake raised an eyebrow. "Not always. Sometimes we choose the ones who make us feel seen." "Seen? Like we're not hiding anymore." She looked away, unsure of her next words. "What if we've been hiding so long, we forgot what it means to be seen?" He smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time you start remembering." She didn't say anything else. But that night, Tyrell didn't sleep. Her heart was too loud. Not from fear of battle, but from the quiet danger of falling for someone who wasn't supposed to matter. He broke their pride without lifting a weapon. The council chamber aboard the Vrexen blade was silent. Cold metal walls, long tables, 7 elite Tharnak commanders seated in a half-circle. At the center stood Drake Callan, arms behind his back, face steady. He didn't wear armor. He didn't bow. And he didn't look afraid. "You've changed them," growled High Commander Virus, the oldest of the 7. "The warriors under Commander Tyrell speak differently now. They hesitate, they reflect." "That's not weakness," Drake replied. "That's evolution." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. "You were brought here to observe, not influence," said another commander. Drake gave a small nod. "And what I observed was pride without understanding, power without wisdom." The words struck hard. Some commanders leaned forward. Some leaned back. But no one interrupted him. "You mocked Earth, laughed at our softness, but our strength isn't loud, it isn't muscles or weapons." He looked each of them in the eye. "It's the ability to suffer and still choose compassion, to lose everything and still build again." Commander Virus narrowed her eyes. "So you broke their pride with poetry and silence." Drake shook his head. "I didn't break anything. I showed them something stronger." "And what is that?" "Control, not over others, over yourself." Tyrell entered the chamber then, uninvited. She walked with purpose, no armor, no helmet, just her voice. "He didn't weaken us," she said. "He woke us up." "You sound like you follow him," one council member said sharply. "No," Tyrell replied, "I walk beside him." The council fell into silence again. Then one spoke quietly. "He never raised a hand, never used force, but still we feel his weight." Drake stepped forward. "Because I didn't come here to fight. I came to remind you what it means to be more than warriors." Virus stared at him long and hard. "What are you then, human?" "I'm not just a man, I'm a mirror," he said. "I reflected the parts of you that you were afraid to face." Silence. No threats. No punishment. Just a long, heavy pause as the council processed what none of them expected. A human man had walked into a warrior empire and made them question what strength really meant. That night, the warriors didn't train. They sat together in a circle sharing stories. Some laughed softly, others spoke of old memories. And Tyrell, she walked beside Drake through the quiet halls, not as commander and guest, but as two souls learning a language older than war. Understanding. "You changed them," she whispered. "No," he said. "They were ready to change, I just opened the door." "And me?" she asked. He stopped, turned, and looked at her the way no warrior ever had. "You weren't the one who laughed the loudest," he said softly. "But you were the first one who listened." And she realized that was the moment she began to fall. Not in battle, but in something far more dangerous. Hope, the human they now call Commander. The battle alarm sounded, but no one ran for weapons. This was not war. It was tradition, a ritual held only once in a generation. The right of choice, where the Tharnak warriors select a new honorary commander, not for strength, not for blood, but for honor earned in silence. And this time, they had chosen a human. Drake stood at the edge of the arena, confused. "What is this?" Commander Tyrell walked toward him, dressed in silver ceremonial armor. Her hair was tied back, her face was calm, proud. "This is the day we stop calling you guest," she said. "Today we call you one of us." Drake looked around. The stands were full. Hundreds of Tharnak warriors. Every one of them watching him. Not with doubt, not with anger, but with respect. "I never asked for this," he said quietly. Tyrell nodded. "That's exactly why you deserve it." She stepped forward and removed her battle badge, the one given only to the fiercest commanders. She placed it in his hands. "With this we name you Karethnar," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "The commander who leads without a sword." The crowd pounded their fists on their chests in unison. Not a cheer, a salute, to a man who showed them a different way to stand tall. Later, Drake stood alone in the high deck, staring at the stars. Tyrell joined him, quiet as always. "So now I'm your commander?" he asked with a small smile. "No," she said. "Now you're my equal." He turned to her, voice soft. "What happens now?" She stepped closer. "Now we walk forward together, not as warrior and outsider, but as partners." She reached for his hand, not in battle, not in formality, but in peace. And he took it, not out of pride, but because he finally belonged. Far beyond the stars, on 1,000 other ships, the story began to spread. Not of a war won, not of a world conquered, but of a man from a quiet blue planet who broke the pride of an empire without ever raising his voice. And they would never forget his name. Drake Callan, the human they now call Commander. The end Milky Way.